Hi, Brittany.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Welcoming everybody back to the
The
E
E
Word.
word. Yes,
Do we
still
have our
here.
special co-host with us today?
We do. She is hanging out. She took her bow out of her hair, but she's resisting being lifted, so she's
Okay.
hacking. But she's
Okay.
here.
That's good.
She's all right. She's executive producing from underneath the desk.
Perfect. Well, you sent me something super interesting today from
I did.
Reddit files, right?
Yes, yes.
You want to give a little overview of
I I find Reddit to be a really fascinating place because if you're unfamiliar with Reddit, it is essentially a messaging board where you can create what's called a subreddit about anything. So you have fandoms from books and movies, and there's a Harry Potter fandom. You have people sharing temperature blankets, where people will they'll crochet these blankets over the course of the year according to the temperature for that week. Anything that you want or can think of, it's probably on Reddit. But Reddit has a specific subreddit that is called Am I Overreacting?
Hmm.
And in the particular Am I Overreacting that I showed you, a young woman was asking other Redditors about whether or not she was overreacting to her fiance. Now, I will really quickly she says that she's gotten an argument with her fiance regarding the federal financial aid freeze. So, if you're unaware, there recently has been a freeze for federal financial aids like Pell Grants, so on and so forth. And so she says that she's receiving a scholarship, but she also uses a Pell Grant, which goes towards her cost of living rather than tuition. And so her fiance's in the Navy and he hasn't deployed. He hasn't even finished his training and he won't even go away for quite some time. But she's sharing with him her challenges. She's left leaning, he is heavily Republican. And so when she says, hey, our president froze Pell Grants and FAFSA, and I'm concerned about my financial aid, they have this exchange back and forth. Uh, and it gets tricky, Karen. It gets tricky. Um, so I'll pause there.
Yes, yes. Well, you're right. It's tricky. I think, there's two distinct things happening in this thread. One is, their debate between, the effects of the freeze and how how these government subsidies in a way work and who it affects. And then there's another underlying tone is the relationship and how he speaks to her. So
Correct.
just calling that out, we're not going to talk about their relationship in that respect, I don't think, right? Like,
No.
I think it's actually, we can sum it up to say that we both agree that he shouldn't speak to her that way, right? And that's a different
We want to be
situation.
kind to the people we love. Yes. Speak with
Exactly.
compassion.
She should be evaluating her relationship based on his tone and remarks. And it's interesting they're having this entire conversation via text,
Yes.
despite being in a relationship, which I think is a little bit weird. They should probably have this conversation,
Definitely a generational thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But, it's more about the sentiments that give you kind of an understanding of how this one issue can be looked at so differently from two different sides.
Yeah. And so I want to just call out a few of his messages because the underlying tone is that she's somehow undeserving
Mm.
and that she is asking that there's not any sort of reciprocity in the granting of Pell Grants, right? Which ostensibly are to create a space where people can receive education eventually become professionals, work hard, pay their taxes, so on and so forth. And that's part of the social contract that
Yeah.
we have, right? Is that we're mutually invested in our own collective well-being. And so for her partner, he says, it's effing crazy for some working taxpayer to have to foot the bill for some
Mm.
2 million U's, meaning people who also receive financial aid to go to college, just because you can't afford it. Mind you, this is her fiance.
Yeah.
So this is someone who also is more personally invested in her and has prior knowledge about her being a low income person.
Yeah.
And so she says, taxes didn't raise. Defunding will not cut taxes for me or you. And that is the issue. And so he says, taxes for potholes, roads, government, paychecks, etc. He says that benefits the American people. You going to college doesn't.
Mm.
He says, you being able to go to college doesn't stop my tires from effing blowing up. How the F do you expect other people to pay for you to go to effing college? That is effing the R word, which we do not use. And he says that way of thinking really pisses me off. And again, this is someone who is in the armed services.
Mm.
And so she says, oh my gosh, why should I pay for your tires, your military pay, your benefits, right?
Mm.
Which, goes to, which is, taxes do allow for defense spending,
Right.
right? Which Congress determines how much defense spending. But whenever we look at the budget, we know that we are the country that spends the most when it comes to defense spending. But nevertheless, he says there are plenty of other hardworking Americans barely making it by, and they have to pay for you. And she says, I pay for them. And he says, well, I keep you from getting effing killed. I keep you from a Chinese man R-wording you. And I say R-wording because this also goes out on YouTube and I don't want us to get censored, but a very
Isn't.
specific type of assault. Right, exactly. He says, I keep you from a Chinese man R-wording you. And so this was the moment where I said, okay, this is as American as apple pie. Let me
Mm.
explain. Let me explain.
Please.
Because this narrative, right, that this person who is, he's speaking to his fiance, right? But
Right.
this underlying narrative that one, you don't deserve anything, that there is no social contract, but two, that there's always this ethnic other,
Mm.
and that there's always the threat of intimate violation and harm that will come to the most vulnerable of us, or the people who are, quote, worth protecting, which are ostensibly white women, right?
Right.
White American women. And so the idea, one, is just like, wait, who? Why a Chinese? Why would, we're talking about her being able to afford her master's program? How did we get to her being assaulted? Why is that something that you would present to her?
And it's so
Make her
specific.
correct. So, like, clearly you're projecting onto her a very specific fear that you have, but this fear isn't as unfounded as we would think, because it immediately made me think of the very first blockbuster, which was The Birth of a Nation,
Mm. Mm.
which was the first film that was viewed in the White House. Woodrow Wilson, right, had everybody around, come, let's view it. And if you've not seen The Birth of a Nation, it is an incredibly divisive film filled with stereotypes, but chief among them is in the film a woman is a white woman is assaulted by these very violent, very crazed black men.
Right.
And in the film, they are not actually black men. They are white male actors in blackface,
Mm.
but they are portrayed to be these sex crazed demons almost, right? Who the only thing that they have on their mind is that they want to violate white women. And we have seen this over and over and over and over again. So you had Birth of a Nation. You have both before and after Birth of a Nation, what's called miscegenation laws, which, if you're unfamiliar, miscegenation laws are laws that prevented Black, Asian, Latin men from marrying, having sex with, or reproducing with white women. Now, ideally, it would go both ways, but very few, if any, white men were ever prosecuted for having children with Black women or Asian women or Hispanic women. And so, again, there's this through line, right, of this very specific fear that's made its way into legislation, entertainment, and even into intimate relationships. So I saw that, and that's why I had to share with you. So I want to know what you think.
Um, well, first of all, that was such an amazing breakdown of the psychology behind that, right? And it's scary in so many ways because that particular fear has permeated through hundreds and hundreds of years, despite it being false. As a matter of fact, I'll go so far as to say, that might just be some projection, right? Because if we look, obviously, we look at history, some of the most violent people have been Europeans colonizing and conquering other countries, pillaging in that respect, right? And it is unfortunate in so many different ways that that history has been celebrated and skewed and then pushed upon other groups who, I'm not saying didn't have, like, obviously certain countries have their own conflicts and tendencies, right? But they're outweighed in many ways than what Europeans have done throughout history. And I don't know how we shift that narrative because it has become so ingrained in the culture for so long. That ethnic othering, as you pointed out, is the basis for discrimination and oftentimes hatred, and that hatred that manifests itself into physical violence. And it's scary that someone in our military who is supposed to be sworn to protect this nation is isolating his views around certain groups as being more worthy of protection, like you said, than other groups. And we're all paying into that same system. So what does that mean for non-white people today and tomorrow? We already know what it meant for them yesterday. And it just keeps proliferating this same false narrative. So that moment that you've pointed out is so incredibly important in understanding the psyche of certain white men and why they feel and act the way that they do. But how do we get them to see us, see all of us as equal, whole citizens deserving of the benefits of government, the benefits of society, and also worth protection?
Right. Because he understands on some level that taxes go to situations and things that, are for the common good. Like he references, right, his tires blowing up and whatever. But he sees himself, again, he's not even out of training. It will be years before he's actually deployed, but he only sees his service as a means of protecting a physical asset, his property
Yeah.
in her sexual identity.
Mm, yeah. And it's also a very selfish point of view. Like you said, like it's a me point of view. Like you talked about the social contract, right? He doesn't make the connection, although she tries to explain it in the thread, that her receiving this grant is not just free money. You know, it's going to be paid back in dividends through her education, through her earnings, to the increased taxes that she's going to pay, to her contribution to society.
Right.
He makes this point about, no one should have to pay for it if you can't afford it. Go to trade school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or wherever else. And he makes the point that, welders make $150,000 a year. I mean, that's true. But
Yep.
there's also this thing called choice, and you should not be prevented from having the opportunity to develop and use your skill sets in the way that you think will best serve your family, yourself, your family, and possibly society. And so you should be limited by the amount of money that you have in your pocket. It's a truth, but when there are opportunities to uplift yourself and give back, then why is that a bad thing? And her other point about, look, they're taking it away, but it's not as if your costs are going to go down.
Right.
It's not like miraculously, oh, you get to pay less taxes. Fantastic. That's never going to be the case. So you should be asking yourself, well, then if they take that away, where is that money going? Is that going into more defense funding? That might be cool for him.
Right.
Is his pay going to go up? I don't know.
Right.
You know,
Right.
he also says people can just go into the military, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are obvious choices, but you just don't want to be limited in any choice. So I think it's sad that people don't understand that it's probably better to have people educated, happy, and fulfilled than to have them desperate and unfulfilled, because that leads to a negative cycle that actually affects society and may actually affect you one day personally in your own backyard.
Absolutely. So perfectly stated, because what we have here is this ongoing fear of inadequacy.
Mm.
And this very subjective fear has become our problem to the point where it's impeded people's ability to connect with one another, to live in communities where you can get to know other people, get to know other experiences, that everybody can contribute to the tapestry of America, because America doesn't only belong to one group, but one
A certain groups that.
group, and so that's really the challenge. And you would hope that people who are going into the armed services, again, that they have respect for the traditions and the values that they are sworn to protect, including freedom and service.
Mm.
Service. You look at a group like the ACLU, which will say, I may not like what you have to say, but I will protect your freedom to say it,
Yeah.
right? Uh, he may not like that people are receiving financial aid to go to school, even for his own fiance, but he will fight not not only for her, ability to not be violated, but he should fight for her freedom to pursue her education. But that doesn't come up for him. And he says, I'm here fighting on I'm fighting on the front line so that this Chinese man doesn't come and do this thing to you. Instead of saying, I'm fighting so that you can go to school and so that you can enjoy this. And we're kind of hopping over the very real possibility that he doesn't want her to be educated, right? That maybe he doesn't believe that that's her role or that's her place. Because even though, again, these are ostensibly two people who are headed down the aisle, he's like, this is a you issue. Like,
Never any, well, we'll figure it out. Let's see how.
correct.
Yeah, there was none of that conversation. It was just like,
Right.
well, you can't do it. Go to welding
That's a
school.
you problem. Right. And so we've become adversaries instead of finding the bridge to connect not only back to each other, but what we want for ourselves and our country.
Can I ask what could be an obvious question? I mean,
It's
he
going to be a
singled
great
out
question.
China.
I know it. Yes.
Are we at war with China right now? So,
Depends on who you ask. But,
I mean, in terms of like needing military personnel to
right.
physically prevent a Chinese man from, I'm trying to understand, like,
Right.
maybe I would make a different connection if we were talking about the
Yeah.
Middle East or whatever. I'm a little confused. I know we're in like digital wars or cyber wars, right?
Right. Right.
But
Like a technological cold war maybe, but yeah, to my knowledge, we've not been invaded,
yeah.
you know.
So how is he, I'm trying to understand his mindset. Like, how is he preventing?
There are Chinese Americans, we just celebrated the Lunar New Year.
Okay, so the military on American soil arresting Chinese people from acts they may do. We're in Minority Report land. Okay, I've got
I
it.
was just gonna say that sounds exactly like Minority Report, and that sounds dangerous. And if we don't take care, we could very easily get to that point.
Yeah,
We don't want
I mean,
past to become prologue, right? I mean, we had Japanese internment camps.
you're right. You're absolutely right. No, and
You know,
I'm really trying to understand. Like, I mean, I'm laughing
yeah,
about it, but like, I could be missing something that I don't know that's going on. I just find that a little. There's a disconnect there that I'm
yeah.
not. I'm
I
not totally
will.
getting.
I'll go back. So, the information that she provided does not share any sort of military insight into where we stand with being invaded, nor do the screenshots. So yes, we have limited access to the information, but
I don't know. Details matter in this case, right? Like when he's trying to make his case. I don't understand. And look, I could also argue about the roads and the potholes. Like, just drive around them. Why should I have to pay for a pothole? I don't
correct.
know.
I don't have children. Why should I have to pay taxes, right? To allow for children to go to school. In
Right?
fact, having served on a board of education, right? These are the types of questions. If you don't have children, why do you want to serve on the board of education?
True. My child is grown. I already paid my dues. Why do I have to, keep paying school
Right,
taxes? Like, why do I have to do
right.
that?
Yeah.
There's
If
a
I
lot of
never
why.
go to this, and so again, if we get to this point of hyper individuality, which
Mhm.
unfortunately has been what I would say one of the biggest challenges to this nation, and one of my biggest gripes is we're so focused on the individual, we're so focused on the self, that we forget that we are a nation. right? That we
Mhm.
should all be working toward a collective good. What do
Yeah.
we want to have the freedom to? I would, if I choose to have a child, I would like to have access to safe healthcare. I would like for my child to have access to a good education that allows for them to compete eventually, right? In a global marketplace.
Hmm.
I would like for my child to be safe in that
Right.
school. I would like for them to have the freedom to learn and be free from threat of any sort of physical harm.
Hmm. Yeah. And I want, even if I don't have a child, didn't have a child, and I have one, but he's grown. I want all the children around me to have those things too. Okay.
Right.
Because the opposite of that is they're uneducated, they're unemployed. And again, that leads to bad things in my neighborhood. Right. So I
Correct.
rather have wholly educated people around me that can have critical thinking skills, that can, make their money, keep up their homes, right? Because you need money for these things,
Correct.
keep up the economy in my local community, in my state. Like all of those things create economic vitality and personal protection and safety and longevity for families. And so we can't just think about ourselves and just go for Delph, right? Like we need to think about the greater community that we're in. And so,
Absolutely.
but unfortunately, that doesn't happen. People want to parse out certain things. And part of me, a little part of me, understands that this is all predicated for the most part on money and the pressures that people are having. Things are getting really expensive.
Sure.
And when you can't afford to do the things that you want to do, whether it's buy eggs, which are absolutely ridiculous, or go on your annual vacation, right? Then you start to feel resentful of all the things that are putting pressures on that. And then the blame game starts to surface. And we have to be really careful not to do that and really understand the different factors contributing to those different economic pressures that you're experiencing and figure out a way that where we all can work together to make some improvements.
Yeah.
But it's never going to be completely fair, right? That's not how the system works. I mean, look at it like look at insurance, right?
Yeah.
Right. I
I
mean,
mean,
helping people pay for the sick. That's how it works, for
what
example. Or
you, I'm sorry. No, please go ahead.
no, 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 no. Just giving it, life insurance is the same way, or home insurance, right? The homes that never need it pay for the ones that do need it. That's just how that
Correct.
particular system works.
Correct. All I was going to say was what you just described sounds like what it would mean to make America great again.
Mm, see, this is why they need to talk to us. We got all the
You
answers.
know, there is always a bridge. And so, um, really and truly, again, very often, I don't know if you've heard this growing up, but having grown up with military folks, having
Mhm,
had a Marine as a father, right?
mhm,
I've often heard feelings aren't facts.
mm,
But what I want listeners to remember is that feelings can become facts because a feeling of inadequacy leads to a feeling of fear, which leads to a feeling of hatred, which leads to divisive thinking, which leads to divisive behavior, which leads to divisive actions,
mm.
which leads to divisive legislation and all sorts of collective harm. So, this feeling of inadequacy really has to be dealt with by those who are feeling inadequate. And instead of outsourcing blame and outsourcing that feeling onto the the Chinese, man, the mythological scary Chinese man, or the mythological scary Middle Eastern person, or the mythological scary Black person.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be dealt with here.
Mm. In the heart, yes.
It's not it's not anybody else's issue.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect note that
Yeah.
we should leave people with. Although I will say in a very lighthearted way that if you're a Cancer,
Oh yes, that's true.
feelings can often be facts.
Feelings can often be facts. And those feelings are rarely wrong. That intuition.
Yeah. With some exceptions. That's not everybody. That's not everybody. There's these two Cancers on the phone right now.
Right.
On the
Elon is a Cancer. We don't claim him. We don't claim him. We push him out of the show.
Oh yeah. Like I said, it's these two on the pod right now. So
Yes.
I said phone earlier, but we're not on the phone.
Yep.
So that was great insight, Brittany. And actually, I hope people replay that last bit and really take that in, because that's at the end of the day what we need to realize. So thank you for that.
Listen, and Reddit did not pay us.
Now,
So,
again,
if Reddit would like our insight, we are happy to share.
yeah,
But yeah, thank you, Karen, for actually reading it and kind of going down this journey with me.
always.
This is random, but
I love random. Hey, it all connects back. It's
it
the end.
does. It does.
All right, Brittany, until next time.
Bye.
Bye.